Good evening. We are excited to have you here tonight. We didn't know what kind of a turnout we would have, but we're certainly excited to see the numbers coming out. People are wanting to know more about the election procedures, and it's something that we always look forward to in educating people on what we do. And so I want to thank you for coming out and working on getting educated. Just for the ground rules, and so you understand what our purpose here tonight. It's not try to convince anybody one way or the other of what happens in or doesn't happen in Colorado. We're simply just going to present to you what we do, what we follow as far as statute, what we follow as far as rule, what we follow as far as best practice. And we're not going to tell you that what we don't know. If there's things we don't know, we're not going to claim that we do. We're going to stay with what we do know, what happens here in Elbert County. I believe that it happens across the state, but I'm not across the state, right? I'm here in Elbert County when we administer elections. So what I'm talking about is what we're going to do in Elbert County, but I do believe it happens throughout the state. And so each clerk has their own little pathway. There's some things that we can do, different procedures that we can do, but what we'll lay out tonight will be the basics of what happens in Colorado, I believe, but for sure what happens here in Elbert County. So we just want you to know that's what we're talking about tonight. We're not going to talk about what happens in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Arizona. I don't know what happens there. Are there questions that I would love to ask those election officials of what happened there? Absolutely. But there's always a filter that takes place, and so we don't know exactly until we were able to talk to those people. And I would love to be able to sit down with those election folks and ask them some direct questions, because questions that come up that we hear in the news, suddenly it's like, well, that's a moot point for what happens in Colorado. I don't understand why they would do that or why they didn't do something. And so I'm like a lot of you probably. I have questions about. I would love to be able to sit down and ask questions, but I don't know. So we're not going to talk about what happens in other states. So we're going to focus on what happens here in Elbert County as far as statute, rule, and best practices. And hopefully you'll get a little bit better idea of how complex it is. An election is not a simple thing to administer. You all get your ballots, you vote, and it's over with. But for us, it's a 6-month process. And so for that, we have some terrific election people here in Elbert County. I want to introduce them to you. They do a fantastic job. This team has been tabbed to administer elections outside the county because of the great work that they do. We've done recalls, we've done special elections, we've done our regular general elections, and this team really knows what needs to happen. They do it, and they do it at a high level. Rhonda Braun is our elections manager. She'll be doing some of the presentation later. Rachel Wilkins is a full-time election staff person. She does a lot of the data processing and that sort of thing. During election time, she does the one that goes deep dives. When there's something, an anomaly or with a signature or something like that, she's the one that takes the deep dive and really digs into what it is. So Rachel does a great job for us as well. And hiding behind the panel is Amanda. Amanda, we have her do several things. During election time, she's full-on election, but I also have her doing other things like being clerk to the board and different things like that, things that I really didn't want to do, but she does a fabulous job with everything we've given her too. So these ladies know their stuff. They know the statutes, they know the rules, and it's fun to work with them to know we've got such a great team that has the integrity, and they want to make sure that everything is done right. So we will be here afterwards for as many questions as you want. I've told them all I fully trust whatever question you give to them, they're going to give you the right answer. So if I'm busy or Rhonda's busy, catch Amanda, catch Rachel. We want to make sure that you leave here tonight with your questions answered. We are live streaming, so I'm just going to say that it is May 20th, 2021. So all of you on the video, hello. And this has generated quite a bit of interest across the state that we're going to go about and go into a little bit of detail on the procedures that we do here in Elbert County. So I'm part of the Eastern Region Clerks Association. Those ladies are excited. to have this. We've said that everybody is getting a lot of questions. This is going to be a video that we hope that many people can use. The people within the Clerks Association statewide are happy that we're doing this, that we have this available and going to be on video, as are some of our contacts within the Secretary of State's office. And so it's going to be a fun night. Feel free to take notes. If you have some questions later on, feel free to do that. As I said earlier, one of the things that we're doing is just, we want to be that open book. There's nothing here that we want to hide. There's nothing here to hide. We want to give out as much information as we can. And so by doing that, people that are in my position as being the county clerk and clerks across the state, we really try and stay out of the politics. And so we're going to stay out of politics tonight. And you know why that is. You know, people that are in the politics and political, you know what politics, the root words, what they mean? Poly for many, and ticks for blood-sucking parasites. So we're going to stay away from that, okay? We're just going to give the facts to you tonight, and as far as what we do, what checks and balances we have, tell you what we know, what we don't know, and we want to be that open book tonight. So Rhonda and I will be tag teaming this evening. We'll go back and forth on some different topics, and I think you'll find it interesting, and we will hopefully cover a lot of your questions, maybe not fully to your satisfaction, to where you say, this is the greatest thing ever, but at least you'll have a foundation and a basis on where you know you need a question, where you think there's a question, where you think needs to be looked into further. And I will be sharing my thoughts on that at the end of the presentation as well. I'm not going to get up here and say that everything's peaches and creams. There's things that we can do better. And so we will be sharing that as well. So the first topic that we're going to talk about tonight is not just for the four of us. It takes more than the four of us to administer an election. Okay? It takes a lot of extra people there. And so we'll be doing the different topics on the screen behind me. And so the first topic that I'm going to talk about is our watchers and election judges. Lots of times people get mixed up and they think that they kind of overlap and have similar roles and responsibilities, and they don't. Watchers and election judges have very different roles and responsibilities. So watchers, they're people that come in and they watch what's going on. It's a pretty descriptive term, right? They do have some limitations. They do have some things that they have to do to be qualified. They're appointed by either parties, candidates, or coordinating districts, issue committees, or by the state. They have to be it's an appointed thing. Nobody can just walk up to us and say they want to be a watcher. You need to find one of those entities to appoint you to be a watcher. It's not a paid position, and there's no involvement. You just watch. And it's really hard because it's a little bit like watching paint dry as we go through the process. And we've had several watchers over the years that want to get involved. They want to help. But that's not the role of a watcher. Their role is to watch. They do have a watcher class that they have to take and pass with the Secretary of State's office. And they get a certificate that they have to present to us that they have passed that certification process. And they also have the oath that says that they are, they're going to keep confidential information confidential, because as a watcher, they have access to be able to watch and see everything that is going on. They have one contact within the building, and you all are more than welcome to come over anytime into the basement of the SEB, and we'll show you what we got. We want to show you what's going on. But during the election, the watcher is not hindered anything. They can watch, so they have that oath. And they cannot speak to any of the other judges. They have one appointed person. Our head judges, we have the head judge appointed from both Republican and Democratic parties, and we usually designate them as the person they can talk to, or Rhonda or myself is who they can talk to if they have a question. And in a small community like Elbert, lots of times the watchers know the judges, right? And so they want to, tell what happened about the hail that happened last week or whatever. That's not what happens. We have to keep those lines of the roles and responsibilities separate because we can't have a watcher talking to someone who's trying to tabulate, right? That's a recipe for an error. And so we want to have that separation. And so there has been times we've had to remind the watchers, your job is just to watch and to be quiet. If you have a question, you need to come to that designated person to do that. Election judges are completely different. They have a different role and different responsibility. They work with the staff to administer the election as the ballots keep coming in. And the first place that we get our judges from is from the parties. They supply us a list, and that's where we get our judges from first. Generally, that first list, we're able to get enough judges for everything. And every once in a while, we have to call one of the parties and say, we need a couple more judges. Can you find us a couple more? But that list comes from the parties. And that list is generated at caucus. So if you are interested in being a judge, make sure that next year, in March, that you go to your party caucus, sign up on the list to be an election judge. And it's terrific. The neat thing about an election judge, when you get on that list, you don't have to just live in Elbert County to be an election judge in Elbert County. It can be from anywhere that's a registered elector across the state, but that's also vice versa. So if we have a lot of judges here that we don't need because we're a smaller county, but our neighbors in Arapahoe or Douglas or Jefferson or whatever are needing more judges of your particular party, it's quite all right for your party chair to work with the other party chairs to supply some of those judges. And so we encourage that. If you want to be involved, there's probably a place for you to be involved as a judge. The judges are also paid, and that varies by county. And we pay a lot of money for our judges. Not really. It's more of a volunteer basis. You might get your gas covered. So it's more of your civic duty and that you want to be involved. But you do get a little bit of money for it. And generally around Election Day and the day before, we get quite a bit of food. We share food. The parties bring us food. We share food. So you really get paid more in food than you do in money. But if you're up to getting paid in food, judging is for you. There are tests for the judges as well, if you're going to be working in SCORE or web SCORE, so that you can know how to administer to that. And in us, we do with our judges the whole process, from the time of receiving ballots or going picking up at a ballot box, a drop box, all the way through the tabulation and sealing them up and putting them away. Our judges have to do everything. Now, in some of the bigger counties, they're very specialized. It might be just that you're doing signature verification or you're doing ballot pickup or so forth, so they don't sit to see the whole thing. But when you're a judge with Elbert County, you get to see the whole process, which is pretty fun to see. There is also an oath required for the election judge that you're not going to disclose anything that you might see that's information. You're going to be seeing live ballots. You take an oath. You're not going to disclose any of that. And it's just overall, it's a fun time for us anyway. I'm not going to speak for everybody across the state, but for our election staff, our election judges, we have a good time. We have a good relationship. And part of that is we set the tone right out the gate that regardless of party, we're here for one reason, and that's to count each ballot and to count each ballot correctly. And if you're not going to play nicely in the sandbox with us doing that, we don't want you. And that is our number one goal of getting there, because we still, even if we have different ideas politically, we can still work for that common goal. And that's what we set that expectation, and we adhere to that. So it does take more than just election staff to administer the election. Everything we get done, it's a 6-month process for us, but during that time that ballots are out, we have to have a lot of help. The watchers and the election judges are a critical part of that. There's a third critical part of that Rhonda's going to talk about that's outside of staff, outside of watchers and election judges, and that's going to talk about voters. Voters have a responsibility in what we do as well. So Rhonda, take it away.
So believe it or not, we do a lot of stuff, but you guys do have responsibilities, and there's things that you can verify on your own, which is super cool. So you are responsible for updating your own voter registration. We can't do it. You can't call me and say, hey, I don't think that person lives there anymore, and then have me update a voter record, which just makes sense. It's a legal thing that you're doing, is registering to vote. So you can encourage people to update their own voter registration, and there's lots of ways that they can do that. So if you receive a ballot in the mail for somebody that does not live at your house, there is a little blurb on the back of the ballot. So a lot of people don't look at that, but it says, if you receive a ballot for someone who doesn't live there, right, return to sender, pop it back in the mail, and it'll come back to us undeliverable. At that point, we can make that voter record inactive, and we won't be mailing stuff there anymore. That person will have to update their voter registration. They're still eligible to vote, but they have to do an update, because we got returned mail and it told us this is not a good address for this person, and we don't want to mail out ballots to somebody that's not actually there. So that's a good way to fix that. So don't just call and yell at us for mailing out a ballot for somebody that doesn't live there, because that's something that you can do. And again, if you know somebody that has moved, there's lots of ways to update your voter registration, and you can just let them know, hey, did you update your voter registration? Because some things are connected, some things are not. Motor vehicle, if you go to motor vehicle, that doesn't have anything to do with your voter registration. But if you update your driver's license, they'll send that to us to update. So the county clerk office is your go-to to find out about your voter registration. There's a lot of people during election time, we get questions from the parties, both major parties, that voters have come to them and said, hey, I didn't get my ballot, or how do I update this or that? And they send them to us, but that's the responsibility of the voter to get a hold of us, because we're the ones that send it out. So let's see, where am I? Some of the resources that voters have, one really good resource is govotecolorado.gov. And you can update your registration, you can register to vote. It ties it to your driver's license. So you've already presented ID, and it ties it to your driver's license, and you can put that in. You can check your ballot status during an election. But all the changes are submitted to the county to process. So you're not actually getting on and changing your voter registration. You're submitting those updates to us, and then we process that. So if you go on and update your voter record and say, well, I looked 10 minutes later and it wasn't done, that's because you have to wait for us to process it. During election time, we have ballot tracks. And last year, the Secretary of State just paid for it for every county. They haven't let us know if they're going to do that this time or not, but if you had an email address on your record, they sent you updates to where your ballot was. So when your ballot was sent out, according to, so when we get ready to send ballots out, we issue those. And when our system says issued, it generates a notice. So Ballot Tracks does not have any access to our voter registration system. They get reports. And so those reports are refreshed and updated hourly, I believe, during the election. And so you get a notification. When we receive your ballot, when you return it to us, we scan the barcode, and you get a little notice that says, we've received your ballot. When we accept your signature, when we've compared it to the signature on your record, you get a little notice that says it's accepted. So those are two ways that you can track your ballot. You can call us, and we'll help you out. There's people that aren't on the computer and aren't able to do that, and we can look that up. We don't ever mind voters asking questions, but sometimes if you can look it up yourself, a lot of people would like to do that. During the election, one of the responsibilities is getting the ballot to us. You can put it in the mail, and sometimes people call us and say, I mailed it a week ago, where is it? Well, I don't know. So we have several county-controlled drop boxes. They're under surveillance. They're well lit, and they're kind of like you guys have probably mostly used them, but they're like the post office boxes. You just put them in there, and that's a really good way to get a ballot to us, because we have bipartisan teams that go pick them up, and then you don't have to worry about where your ballot is. So just get it straight to us, put it in a drop box. You can drop your box actually in any county in the state in a ballot drop box, which is super exciting. Sometimes it takes a minute to get to us. So if you drop your ballot, your Elbert County ballot in Chaffee County, they're gonna get it to us. And we've gotten them, believe me, from all over the state. So it will get there, but again, don't call the next day and say, I don't know where my ballot is. I dropped it in a ballot drop box. If you dropped it in the middle of Denver, they're gonna get it to us, but it might take them a couple of days. If you have not seen your ballot, if you have not received the ballot that we mail to you within 2 weeks of an election, then there's some steps that you can take. Go on and check your address on Go Vote Colorado. Make sure you've updated. A lot of times people have moved, changed a mailing address, and the ballot's gonna come back to us undeliverable, and you're still sitting there waiting for it, and you had not remembered to change your address. So check your address, make sure it's right, update it if necessary. Check your ballot status on GoVote or Ballot Tracks if you have that. Call us. We're always happy to look that up for you. And you can always come and vote in person. So we have general elections, we have 2 weeks that we're there, and all the other elections, we're there a week before the election. So you can just come in and vote, and when you do, we will, if you say I didn't get my ballot, we'll check your address, and if we can figure out what happened, we'll make sure we get that corrected. Know your deadlines. So a great way to do that is to look on the Secretary of State's website. They have an election calendar. So know what the voter deadlines are, know what the candidate deadlines are, know when the elections are. There's way more elections than just the November elections, especially the last year and a half. We ran 6 elections in 15 months. So not all of those were on the SOS calendar. Like Dallas said, we ran a few smaller elections, but look on our website and look on the calendar. So those are some things that as voters that you guys can take responsibility for and help other people just get that information. Let's see, moving on to our, what we call SCORE. It's a statewide Colorado registration election. It's our voter registration system online. By statute, the Secretary of State is to implement and maintain a centralized, computerized voter registration system. So it's important to know that it's more than just a voter list. It's not just that. Some of the things that it affects is voter eligibility. We can look up candidate eligibility. We ensure you get the right ballot by where you live and what districts you're in. We ensure that we don't create duplicate records. So if you changed your name, you come in and do a name change, we don't create another record because we have you in that system. Your eligibility to sign petitions, signatures necessary for petitions. If you come in and say, I want to do a recall, or I want to petition onto the ballot, we can look up and find those things. We can look up and see who your elected officials are. And those things, most of those things are available to you on Go Vote Colorado too. So that ties into that, and you can look up that information. And who accesses our voter registration system? That's important to know. The Secretary of State administers and they maintain it, but They do not touch voter records. So they don't do any updates, they don't register people. If they get a voter registration, we don't get as many paper registrations anymore, but they send it to the county to process. And the county is responsible for doing the voter updates. That includes updates from the different agencies. CDOR with the driver's license updates, CDPHE, they send us lists of deceased voters. The NCOA, the National Change of Address, the post office. So if you fill out a forwarding form with the post office, they're going to send it to us. And they provide support for the counties with a voter registration, with election setup, and system support. So let's see, voters. I already talked about how you guys are responsible for updating, and that all goes into our voter registration system. The voters sign an affirmation when they register to vote of citizenship, and they provide a driver's license and all the ID. You have to be at least 16 years old to pre-register, and then you do not get sent a ballot until you are eligible to vote. So when you are going to be 18 on election day, we'll send the ballot. There's residence address, there's mailing address. We mail ballots literally all over the world. So you have to have a residence address in Elbert County for us to mail you a ballot, but we send them all over the world. The county responsibilities. We are responsible for updating the voter registrations. The parties, the candidates, voter registration agencies, none of those can access the voter registration system to make any changes or updates. So anybody that helps register voters, they still get those updates to us. So they all come through the county. And we cannot initiate any changes. Like I said, if you come and tell me somebody moved, we cannot just go in and initiate that. We have to have documentation, which just makes sense. You can, on GoVote, you can also withdraw your voter registration if you want to do that, or if you're moving. You can update your affiliation, your party affiliation. So the difference between, I hear a lot about removing voters from the list and removing voters that shouldn't be on there. We cancel voter records. Those records are not removed, but they are canceled. So if somebody moves away and they're canceled, they would have to re-register. They would be registered as a new voter. If we get returned mail, we make that record inactive. So that's the difference between canceled and inactive. So if we send out a ballot, it bounces back to us, and the voter does not update their record, then that record is inactive. We won't be sending mail to that voter at that address anymore. They're still eligible to vote, but they have to make an update before they can vote. And we also, if we're going to cancel a record, there's a few things we have to do. We have to have minimum matching criteria. We have to have name, date of birth, and either driver's license, last four of the social, or the residential address has to match the record that we're sent before we can cancel that record. It helps ensure that we don't create duplicate records to have the minimum matching criteria. And if we're going to cancel a record, we can't do it just because somebody came in and said, that person died, you need to cancel it. One of the ladies from Secretary of State's office said that actually had somebody come in and their ex had moved out, and they called and said they died and you need to cancel their voter record. So we have to have documentation. So during election time, we also, in our voter registration system, we enter all the information into our voter registration system, the candidates, the names, it ties it with their parties, the ballot issues, all of the things that are going to go on the ballot, we enter that. We work with all the coordinating entities. So if a fire district, for example, is having an election, they certify the content to us, and we just put it however they have certified it. One of the things we do is generate a lot of public voter lists. So if you want to get a voter list, that's public information, so you can get that from us. We also mail ballots out of the office. After we send the list to the vendor, when we have voter updates, then we go ahead and mail those. The election judges also access that because we have same-day registration. They have to do a lot of the things that I do and that these guys do. They have to update records and register new voters, so they have access just to be able to do that. And the election judges are given very limited access, so they only get access for the job that they are doing at that time, so they can't get in and do anything else and score. Let's see, am I up next again? Yes. Oh, you put me all in a row. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about ballots, so hopefully you're still awake. All voters in Colorado submit a paper ballot, and that's really important. There's no ballot information stored on any devices. So we have to have the touch screens to vote on for handicap accessibility. We're required to have that, and anybody can come in and use that when you vote in person, but it still prints out a ballot, and we are going to scan that ballot. So if we need to do a recount, we're not pulling information off of cards or USBs or anything else. There is nothing stored in that device. Every single voter puts a paper ballot in the box in one form or another, either in an envelope or they present ID in person and they get a paper ballot and they put it in the box. So if you need to do a hand count, again, you're not downloading anything or looking on any cards or wondering if anything changed. Nothing can be corrupted. You've got a piece of paper for every single voter. And your ballot is specific to you. So you get to vote on what you pay taxes on. It's just that simple. So you're not all in this room. You're all going to get way different ballots. So there's different ballots for the precinct that you're in. So we know which precinct. And if districts are coordinating with us, so if you have a fire district, I'll pick on them a little bit, but if you have a fire district that is having putting an issue on the ballot, then if you live in that district, you get to vote on it. If you don't, then you don't get to vote on it. So we have lots of different ballot styles depending on what you pay taxes for, because that's what you get to vote for. With the ballot printing, the county, we can print ballots in-house. And due to really, really tight deadlines, so 60 days before the election, we get the certification from all the entities of what they're going to have on the ballot. And they certify that. We put that all together. We get certification from Secretary of State's office on the state and federal offices. They put those down. 45 days before the election, we have to have ballots to our military and overseas voters. That's a hard deadline. It doesn't matter. You get those out, which means we have to put all that together. We have to program our machines. We have to be able to get ballots designed and printed and tested to make sure that those are going to read. And it leaves us with not very much turnaround time. So in our county, we go ahead and print out our own ballots for those ballots we have to send out so early so that we can get those out. We also have a print vendor, and once we get the ballots designed, we send them the PDFs, And they look at them and they send them back to us and say, well, you need to proof them. And so we proof them again. We proof them about 1 billion times, I'm pretty sure. And we send them the PDFs of the ballot, and they, again, have no access to score. Everybody works with us. The county clerk sends out, or the office of the county clerk sends the voter list to the vendor, and they insert your secrecy sleeve, your voter instructions, your return envelope, and your correct ballot. And then they work with the post office to find a time that they can drop those ballots in the post office to get those out to you. It's 22 days before the election. So that's why I was saying if 2 weeks before the election, if you hadn't seen your ballot, then maybe start to question a little bit. Undeliverable ballots is actually a good thing. It helps us clean up the voter rolls. So if the ballot comes back to us undeliverable, again, we know not to mail anything anymore. Those people might have moved, they might have come in and updated their address, and so at the very end of the election, if people have not updated their address, they've not come in and voted, then we send a letter by forwardable mail, because ballots don't get forwarded. So we send them a letter by forwardable mail. I don't know if I'm even saying that right. And they can, we send them a form. And we say, hey, you know, it looks like you've moved, and a lot of times it'll catch up with them and they'll fill out their change form so they can continue to get elections. So if a record is made inactive because it's undeliverable and there's no voter updates for 2 general election cycles, excuse me, then we can cancel the record. The paper ballots that we print, the PDFs, there are no markings on the ballots to identify the voter. So that's really important, because there's absolutely no way that we can go in and tell which ballot was yours, ever. And so no voter can ever face retribution for how they voted. No elected official can find out how they voted. It's just not possible. After we take the ballots out of the envelopes, we shuffle those and put them in a big stack and put them through the tabulator. And then they're tabulated in batches of 50. They're kept in order. We keep a paper log. Every batch we put through, we keep a log. If misfeeds, the tabulator misfeeds, because we're putting them in the scanner, we just pull it out. We cancel that batch and we put them back in. We have bipartisan teams that run those through. And when we do recounts, we run them in the same order that we had run them the first time. One of the recounts that we did, we had one ballot that was different, and we were able to, the Secretary of State worked with us, and we were able to figure out which ballot was different, which is pretty impressive. Rejected ballots, the envelopes are never opened. So if you forget to sign your ballot, it'd be rejected, your ballot envelope. If your signature does not match, that just stays in the envelope. And we send you a little love note, and you get to return it with a photo ID. And if you return it with a photo ID within 8 days with the affidavit and say, yes, that was my ballot, then we can count your ballot. When we open ballots, we can reject the ballots there, but that's pretty unusual. If you decide to send 2 ballots in your envelope, then we're going to reject that. But that's about the only reason we would reject them at ballot openings. So we're not actually rejecting the ballot itself. We don't know what's on the ballot, because when we reject, when you hear rejected ballots, it's the envelope that we reject. And for our voting system, we use Dominion. It is not on the internet. We use secure thumb drives to transfer the exports from our voter registration system into the system so that we can design the ballots. we proof it and proof it and proof it, and we get really tired of voting. I will just tell you, those ballots are really, really long. So we get a lot of sample ballots and we vote them, we hand tally them, we tabulate them, we make sure that they are reading correctly. We do that internally. I make everybody in the office participate. We all get to vote a lot. And we also vote on the touchscreen machines, print out ballots and tabulate those and hand tally those. So we are confident that the machines are reading correctly. If for some reason we find they're not, we go in and make sure that they are. About 100% of the time, if there's a discrepancy, it's human error. We go back and we look and it was in our tally. There is also, once we finish that, or we finish that before we do a public logic and accuracy testing. So you guys could all come watch. It's super exciting. We have so much fun. So we have, yeah, it's really exciting. So we have bipartisan board. Each major party appoints a representative, and they vote 25 ballots. We give them test ballots, and they hand tally. And then we have a board of judges come in and help them out. And they hand tally them, they run them through the tabulator, and we do the same thing. We let them vote on the touchscreen machines, print out the ballots, run them through the tabulator, and once they're satisfied that everything is reading correctly, then they will certify those machines, and we just seal them up until election time. And we, of course, clear them out, and I run 0 reports so that the judges know when they start tabulating, when they get the ballots, the real ballots, that those are zeroed out. So we check and make sure that that is done. So with adjudication, you guys have heard a lot about adjudication. When we tabulate the ballots, we put the ballots in, and if you've noticed on the top of your ballot, if you get one from Elbert County or in Colorado, it says, if you vote for somebody and you want to change your mind, I'm sure that's not the language on there, then you put a line through it and vote for the choice that you want. Well, when we run through the tabulator, the scanner, all it sees is 2 things in the target area. So it says, hey, that's an overvote. They voted for 2. They were supposed to vote for 1. It sends it, we have a closed network that is just that machine, our machines, our voting system machines are on, sends it to adjudication. So our bipartisan teams of judges sit down, and a lot of times when we do this, it's pretty much everybody in the room. We at least have 2 judges, but we have a Democrat and a Republican. It brings those ballots up, and they get to look at them and review them. And adjudication is simply honoring voter intent. So if you send in your ballot, you made a mistake, you crossed it out, you said, hey, that is not what I meant, and I can look at that and I can say, clearly, this is what the voter is choosing. Then on the computer, they can take off the vote that you didn't want to count so that your intent is honored. If you overvote on one race and just leave it with 2 votes, the rest of the races on the ballot count. So it doesn't mess up your whole ballot, but it would not count on that race. So if the judges look at it and they see, no, they just voted for, in the presidential race, they voted for the princess and Rocky, then they would just say that's an overvote. Neither one of those count, and they would let that go through, or they would take off the vote to make it count. When the ballots are tabulated, there's conditions that send them to adjudication. So the overvote I just talked about, so if we can determine what the voter intent is, we make that work. Completely blank ballot. Every once in a while we get ballots that people just put in that are blank. So we review those just to make sure that pick something up. Last election, we had a ballot that we saw, and I just think the little person couldn't see very well because they had drawn in next to the circles, and they were really, really close, but you could kind of see that they really tried. So our judges were able to honor the voter intent for that voter. So they're never marking on the ballot. They're never making it so we'll just fill this bubble in. In fact, we give the voters different pens. So if they marked on the ballot, it is the pens that they have are not what you mark ballots with. So they're a different color, and so all of our judges use that. So there's not even a question that any judge marked in a bubble on a ballot. The other thing that sends the ballots to adjudication is what they call ambiguous mark. So if you didn't get enough of the bubble filled in. So sometimes we just have people write us love notes on the ballots. It's awesome. And they're just like, they write a note and they happen to go across a bubble. And so it would send it to adjudication, and we would be like, no, that was part of a "you're a jerk" written on the ballot, and that was not a vote. So we look at those too. But if it sees something in there and there's just a little mark, it'll send it, and yes, we do get those. My favorite was a couple of years ago, somebody had written "you're a jerk" or something probably not even as nice as that on the ballot, and they voted for the person. They filled in the bubble. So I don't know what you're trying to do here, but it was pretty funny. Any write-in is sent to adjudication. If there is anything in the write-in box, or if the bubble is colored in, it is sent to review to the election judges. And only qualified write-in candidates are counted. So usually Mickey Mouse wins every time on the write-ins, but we don't keep track of the invalid write-ins. I have people call in afterwards. We had I don't even remember the name, but somebody wrote in a name of a person a bunch of times on this last election, and they called in, they said, well, how did that person do? Well, we only keep track of valid write-ins, and the rest of them are just rejected as invalid write-ins. But we have to review every single one of those. So sometimes in an election like this last one, we had 3 write-in lines, so 3 chances for people to write in. And so a lot of those ballots were sent to adjudication, which did not mean that the voter overvoted or there was anything wrong with it, but every write-in has to be reviewed by election judges. And then at the end, the cool thing about that is at the end of the election, we have a record of every single ballot that the judges adjudicated. And we do go back and review those, and I don't review all of them, but we go in and check and make sure that that process is being followed. There's a very good voter intent guide that they can look at. There's pictures of almost every scenario that you can think of. So if they don't know what to do, we usually have a really big powwow, but we can find most of them in that guide. So reporting out of our election system, there's no results until election night. We're not calling anybody, telling them whether they're ahead or behind. If I run a report before 7 p.m. on election night, it's going to say 0 every single time. I have to hit the magic button. It's called Validate and Publish. And once I hit that button, then all the ballots that we've tabulated those results are what is going to show up. But if I decide to hit that button before 7 p.m. on election night, it sends back all those ballots that were adjudicated, it sends them back to the judges. So the judges would know, it's logged. They would be like, why are we doing these again? Every time you do adjudication on a ballot, it's also on the log on the image with that ballot. So there is nowhere even the results file on the tabulator is encrypted. So even if I look at it, it doesn't mean anything. So there is no way that we know any results until 7 p.m. on election night. And because we can start tabulating ballots earlier, we can take our time. If we are off a number, or we think, we need to find a ballot, or something isn't right, we can just stop and we can take everybody that's in there and we can look for it. It's not like we're trying to get everything done on election night, so we can do a lot better work. And we don't have to do it all with really tired eyes and people that have been there all day. So it's really good that we are able to tabulate them before the election. So at that point, at 7 p.m., I'll hit the button, we print a report out from the system. We have a secure thumb drive that we export the election night reporting, and we send that, we go to a computer that is connected to the internet, we upload that to the Secretary of State's site, and after we upload that, we take that paper that we've printed out and we check against those numbers just to make sure that they are the same numbers. And they always have been, but we do double check that, and we have to double, triple check that and sign off on that. But the results are not official until the audit is complete and the canvass board meets and certifies the election. So any results on election night are unofficial. There are a lot of ballots that are counted after 7 p.m. on election night, which confuses a lot of people. Any ballots that are received, obviously, by 7 p.m. in a drop box, we're going to count. And I've already told you people can drop them in drop boxes in other counties, so they take a while to get to us. We have until 8 days after the election to get those processed and counted. They go through the signature verification and everything. If somebody cures their ballot, so if we've sent them a love note and say we rejected your ballot, they have until 8 days to get that in. Our military and overseas voters have until 8 days to get their ballot in, but it has to be postmarked. So they have to transmit it by election day. And provisional and statewide ballots are reviewed for eligibility, so we have those that we don't do those immediately because we wait and see if somebody put in another ballot. I think it's you. They're tired of me.
So to finish up a little bit on our Dominion system and the checks that we go through that, Rhonda talked a little bit about how many times we actually test ballots and run them through the system and verify a hand count versus what the machine is telling us. And this election, this past election, has generated a lot of interest, a lot of concern along the ways with those machines. And so we made the decision that we were going to redo or do a hand count of the presidential election out of all of our ballots, 19,131 of them, and compare that to what our tally was on election night. And so this past Monday and Tuesday, we brought in bipartisan teams of election judges. Staff was involved with that, and we went clear through every one of those ballots, marking them by hand, just doing the presidential, because if we were to do, remember how long that ballot was? It'd take forever to do that by hand. We just looked at the presidential race, and what we found was that we were 99.98% accurate, which is pretty good. We had 3 ballots that we could pull out and attest to human error as to why those were different than what should have been tabulated and counted. And we have examples of those 3 ballots here tonight. So if anybody's curious about exactly why those ballots were different than what it was first scanned when we did the hand count, we're more than happy to show those to you and explain to you why and what happened with those. But a 99.98% accuracy rate is pretty good. And so we know that the numbers that we submitted to the Secretary of State's office is the number that came through our system. Another thing that we are able to do because of the system, Rhonda talked a lot about all the different moving parts and everything. For those of you who have been around and looking at Elbert County for a while, you know that over the past couple of years, we've had some mandatory recounts where the margins were so small, they fell within the margin that we had to do those mandatory recounts. Well, one was our 18th judicial in this past election, and if you remember a couple of years ago, we had a primary county commission race that ended up being decided by one vote. And so when we do those counts, we scan all the ballots again, and what it does, it creates a whole new ballot manifest, and we have a whole new a scan record of that ballot and everything through there, so we can compare where it was. On both of those races, we showed one ballot difference on our recounts. And because of our system and the way it takes care of it and the way it streamlines it, and we can number them and we know exactly which one and how this one was counted and how this one was counted, in both instances, we were able to go back to the exact ballot of why there was a discrepancy there and look at it. And quite frankly, the reason is because sometimes voters do silly things on ballots. And so when those things get sent to adjudication, it's sometimes hard to interpret. And so the judges do their best, we do our best, but that we are able to go back to that exact ballot, which is pretty remarkable to see exactly where it was. And so if we didn't have a system that was able to do the things that it does, we would be lost on that. We wouldn't know where it was. So it's important that we have that system, we're able to do that. Rhonda talked a little bit about election night reporting, and it's going to be something I talk about later on some things I think can strengthen what we do. But election night reporting goes out at 7. We were suggested strongly that we upload a couple times during the night and then one time before we go home for the evening. And so you've heard lots of the bigger counties, Arapahoe, Denver, Jefferson, those different counties, they may not finish that night just because they get such an overwhelming number of ballots that come in. We generally finish. We get everything done with that. But we take that ENR report, generally it's either Rachel or myself, that does the upload to the Secretary of State's office. And this is a check and balance. This is one of the checks and balances that we have, so that each county knows what the count is that we have. We can verify what is being uploaded into the election night reporting before we publish it, and then it gets published on the statewide election night reporting system. And so it's a checks and balances there. And so if there was a party, either the major parties or minor parties or whoever, was concerned on how that was getting reported, there's a very simple way to check that. And that's to have a person at each county clerk's office getting those reports when they come off, because they're public record, sending those to a centralized place, and they could all be, whether it's whichever party it is or a group that was interested in it, they could then take their own tabulation to see what's being compared against the state. So there's very easy ways for people to get involved and do double checks on things like that. After the election is completed, before we completely can certify it and say it's gone to bed, we have to go through an audit process. And in Colorado, we do a risk-limiting audit. And we've been at conference, been through hours of class on risk-limiting audit. So I'm going to try and do it in 5 minutes. So, we'll do our best. But the risk-limiting audit is a way that we verify that the outcome is correct. And I'm a little hard-headed sometimes, and it took me a long time to wrap my brain around what the risk-limiting audit was all about. It wasn't about verifying every single ballot was tabulated correctly. It's to verify that the outcome is correct, okay? And for me, it just was I had a hard time getting around it. But one of the mathematicians was able to explain at one of our conferences that something that made sense to me to a degree, that if you have a big vat of soup, right? And this is all of our ballots. If you have this big vat of soup, do you have to eat the whole bowl to know or the whole vat to know if it was salty or not? No, you can take a sampling, a statistical sampling, and pull it out to see if the outcome was correct for the ballots and for the soup. You'd know if it was too much. And so the Secretary of State's office sets what that risk limit is, what percentage that we're willing to work under, that the outcome is correct. And that determines the number of ballots that we're going to pull. And it's the individual ballots that we pull. It's generated from the manifest that comes from us. It's a county manifest of the ballots. There's an algorithm that is used that is picked based on the roll of a dice that the Secretary of State's office does in an open public meeting that determines which algorithm is going to be used, which then determines which ballots are going to be assigned to each county to pull. And so they send us a list of the ballots. You need to pull this certain number of ballots. We're testing this certain race. And our canvass board, our bipartisan team, comes in. We pull those specific ballots, and we test what the ballot actually shows versus how it was tabulated within the system. And so it may not take a lot of ballots if there's a wide margin, right? It doesn't take as many ballots than if there was a closer margin. And so it just depends on the margin and which race is picked for us to do the risk limiting audit out. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some ideas on how to strengthen that, in my opinion, for the RLA. But the risk limiting audit, then once we go through that process and it is satisfied we're within that risk limit, then the canvass board and myself can sign off on that election and say that we're certified with what these results are. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the risk limiting audit later on what we can do with that. But I just want to talk a little bit about the basic part of security. And then Rhonda's going to have a little bit more, and then I'm going to close for the evening. Election professionals across the country have three criteria that has to be the bedrock for a secure system in place in the state. And we've been promoting these, and it makes a big difference. And so when we talk about a lot of the other states that are having trouble, they may not have all of this. And so it's important to realize what we do have in Colorado. One of the things election professionals say is that you must have a statewide voter database so that you have that control with there. In January of 19, we did a exercise pre-COVID down in Colorado Springs. It's called EPIC, and it was basically a triage. If something went wrong within the election, how are you going to react? And so it attracted attention from across the country. And during lunch, I happened to be sitting at the table with the Assistant Secretary of State in Ohio. So they had come out to look and see what we were doing and how it was working, because they were looking at doing the same thing. And as we were discussing with them what they do, she said, we don't have a statewide voter database, a statewide voter system. So, well, how does that work? Well, each county in Ohio, at least at that time, I don't know if they've made any changes with this, each county was responsible for that database, for their county database. See any potential problems there? All right. We've caught people here, maybe intentional, maybe not, that have voted in one county in Colorado and also tried to turn a ballot in here. And the only way that we're able to catch that and say that they can't turn in more than that one ballot is because we have this statewide voter database that instantly tells us when that ballot is scanned in that ballot's in. And so even if a person were to move in during that time when we can issue a ballot, and they say, yeah, I just moved in, they show us the credentials that they have, and we can issue them a ballot. If they've also got a ballot in another county that they've turned in, guess what? The DA is going to be giving them a call. And if we didn't have that statewide voter database, we wouldn't be able to have that security. The other thing that the professionals ask for or say that makes for a great standard is to have a paper ballot for every voter. And we do that in Colorado. Everybody has a paper ballot. We mail one to everybody. If someone's new and moved in, they can come in. We can issue one. If people are more comfortable or they need to use the machines, that doesn't do a count. All it is a tablet connected to a printer that prints out a ballot. That's all it does. And so we have that actual paper ballot record for every vote that comes into the clerk's office. And the third thing that is vital to making sure you have a secure election as far as the bedrock is to be using bipartisan teams. And we take that very seriously. We use the bipartisan teams for everything, except maybe slicing the envelope open. But they're in the same room, so they're not doing anything. But we have bipartisan teams that every vital part of the steps that go through are looking at it. And so it's important that we have those three things as a bedrock to make sure that it's a security, and everything builds off of those three things. Rhonda's going to finish up here real quick with some action that we want you to do for, since you're so excited leaving here, you're going to go do something. Here we're going to have some action steps, and I'm going to finish up with some things I think that can be done within the state to strengthen what we do.
All right. I really am excited that you guys are here. I hope you're excited. Yay! There you go. You were in the right place. I just wanted. Well, we'll have questions afterwards. I just want to say that you're in the right place. So the county clerk is your go-to person. It's your main point of contact. That office is the main place that you need to go to get the information. We're getting election information from quite a few places, and some of it doesn't even make sense. So go find out what actually happens, and you guys are doing that, so thank you. I just appreciate that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about voter lists. Voter lists are available to the public at any time. You can call us and get a voter list. You can go to the Secretary of State's office and you can get statewide voter lists, and there's a little fee for that. And during the election, every hour, they update the list of who's voted. And the purpose of those lists, probably a lot of you guys in here have worked on campaigns or made phone calls, and those are the purpose of that list, is to say, this is who's already voted. So you get the list and it says, Ted's already voted. We don't need to call him. And hopefully they get updated lists, and so that they're not calling you if you have voted. That is the purpose of the list. The lists do not ever contain personally identifiable information, like your full date of birth, your social, your driver's license number, your email address is actually confidential. It doesn't go out on there. Confidential voters. So we have people that would be in danger if their name and address was made public. They're not on the list. We definitely want to take care of our law enforcement and their families. We don't want to put their names out to the public. So they can come in and talk to us, and we put their names confidential. So they're still on the list, but that list isn't going to go out to the general public. So there's other circumstances, but if people are in danger, we do our best to protect those names. So those names are not going to be on those lists. And you're also not going to be able to, confidential voters are not able to access, like Go Vote Colorado. They need to call us because that's more public. So the other confidential voters are our pre-registrants. So I mentioned earlier, you can register to vote at 16. You are not, that name is kept confidential. So your 16-year-old's name isn't being sent out to anybody. They're not eligible to vote. That just stays in the system until they are eligible to vote. So one of the lists that we put out, that public list during the election, it's called the CEO 68, which doesn't mean anything to you guys. CE is for custom extract from the Secretary of State's office. That list is for making phone calls and keeping track of that. That list is not an appropriate list to verify and account for all the votes cast in an election. So if you get that list and you look and say, well, they reported this many votes, but there's only this many names on the list that says they turn in ballots, so there must be something wrong. You better believe there's going to be some differences because we protect those confidential voters. But that list is definitely not appropriate, not the appropriate way to verify those numbers. I wanted to talk a little bit about our duties also with Canvass. So the major political parties appoint somebody to be part of the Canvass board along with the county clerk, and they're the ones that sign off and certify the election. So it's not over till the Canvass board sings and signs the election, or signs off on the election. Their duties are to reconcile the ballots cast in an election, confirm the number of ballots counted in that election does not exceed the number of ballots cast in that election. So number of ballots equals number of votes cast equals number of envelopes or signature slips. In-person voters, it's just like the old poll books, only they sign it on a slip. So we're going to have a signature on something, and all of those things match. None of those things are connected. So we can count all the envelopes, count the number of ballots, pieces of paper, and we can look in the voter registration system and see how many people got vote credit, and those are going to match. So that is how we verify that. So some action steps. We don't want to just come and tell you all the stuff we do. We want you to be able to, I already talked about some voter responsibilities that you have. Make sure you're updated, make sure your friends know to update, help them out. Just know that we operate under laws and rules. So some of the things we do could, like Dallas is going to talk about and has talked about, could be done a little bit differently, but this is what we have to do under the laws and rules. And if you want to see change, you have to know what the laws and rules are that we operate under, because we can't just change what we're doing sometimes, because this is, we're under the law, we operate under that. So you have to make an effort to understand and educate yourself on that. We do everything within our power to safeguard the voter registration, protect the voter anonymity, and correctly count and report every single vote. So our goal here is just to educate you on our processes. Ask a lot of questions. I'm a question asker too. And I know some of you guys are in here are big question askers because I've talked to some of you guys. But your county clerk is going to be your credible source of information in this office. We're going to be the ones that are going to be able to answer your questions. And if we don't know the answer, I'll find out who we can talk to if it's in our wheelhouse. Some of the things we get a lot of questions about with elections, but we don't handle is like the campaign finance stuff. So we can steer you in the right direction, but that's just not something that, luckily, that we have to handle in addition to everything else that we do. So when you know our processes and the reasons that we do what we do, then you can pick a place to start if you see changes that you think need to be made. Some of the proposed changes that people come to us and propose, we're already doing. And it's just a matter of they don't understand the process. So we have public testing that I mentioned earlier, the audit that Dallas talked about. Y'all can come and watch. It's really fun. But if you really want to know what the process is, come and see. Come see what we do. And when we certify that the machines are reading correctly before the election, we go through that whole process. We do the adjudication. We hand tally and then we feed it through. So you can really see what the process is. And we post those dates on our website. And Dallas mentioned become a watcher. You have to be appointed. You can't just show up. But, say I want to go see what's going on. A lot of the watchers that we had in this last election They said, I just didn't know what you did, so I wanted to come see. It's a great way to learn. The watchers that we have, not only are bored, but they come to us and they're like, you know what, there's no way that you can mess this up, because every single step, we count those ballots. We have a different team counting, we verify. If, because our judges do all the different jobs, they realize if something is off down here, every step along the way, they're gonna find it. They log everything, everything, everything. So know how to verify the results. We talked about you can get a hold of your county, find out what their results were. You can look on the Secretary of State's website. So don't use a public voter list to figure out what the election results were, or to verify them. And if somebody's putting information out about Colorado elections, get on the Secretary of State's website and verify that those numbers that they're reporting are actually the results, the election results. The elections calendar, I mentioned that earlier. Get a Secretary of State's elections calendar. Look through it. See what the dates are for the voters, for the candidates. For us, our deadlines are on there. The cool thing about the calendar is it also has statute and rule references for every single event. So if you are like, well, that seems like a funny thing to do, you can look up the law and see why it says that or see where it says that. Get involved. That's really going to be key. Run for office, help find somebody to run for office, support candidates, let people know that you're getting involved. Know who your elected officials are. You can't change anything if you don't have people in office that are interested in doing that. So find people that are interested in doing what you're interested in doing and doing the right thing. Get those people in office, help them out, back them. Make sure that you do that. A lot of people don't even know who their elected officials are. So that's pretty basic. Just find out who your elected officials are. And most people get their information from social media. So now you guys know where to at least to get some information on elections. Educate everybody else on the roles that the elected officials play. What roles do the different elected officials have in elections? The county commissioners, there's budget things involved. So, you know, talk to them. Your county clerk. Find out when these offices are up for elections. Have I mentioned the county clerk is pretty important? The county clerk is closest to the people and accessible. So even in the big counties, I've talked to people all the time that sit down with the county clerk. They're accessible. Sit down and talk to them. See what they think, see what information you can get from them. They're the boots on the ground, and they're actually running the election. The county clerk job is not often in the spotlight, and we have some amazing county clerks in Colorado, and most county clerks in Colorado run 4 different departments. So they're not just doing election, they're doing 4 different departments, and they do a great job. And they're more than happy to answer your questions about any of those. Secretary of State's office. That office is not often in the spotlight. And nationwide, we need to look and see who our secretaries of states are, because they're the one running the elections. And some of them, you know, that made some different decisions this year. So make sure you know who's in the Secretary of State's office. We need really strong leadership in the Secretary of State's office. They have oversight of the statewide elections. They influence the legislature and the governor, and they provide the support and the training for the county clerks and the election officials. And our Secretary of State's office, the elections department, we've worked with a lot of those guys for years, and they're amazing. They put everything into what they do and just make sure that we do things the right way. They're always more than happy to take our calls and provide support. Legislators, find out who your legislators are. They're the ones that make the laws. So they need to know how elections run. And you need to find some people, support some people, get behind somebody, make some phone calls with your legislators. They can support and defend our strengths, and they can work to change the laws that weaken our system. I would bet after tonight, if you listened, that you know more than most, if not all of the legislators, about elections, about what we actually do in Colorado. The district attorney, find out who your district attorney is. They're the ones that prosecute violations. So find out whether they're doing that, what they think about that. We need a good, strong district attorney across the state, across the nation. The governor, obviously. So the local elections are where you're going to have the most influence. So get involved somewhere and make sure that people that get involved are going to be the ones that do the right thing and strengthen our system and are available to serve you guys, because that's really the bottom line. We're here to serve the voters and to accurately and consistently across the state run elections. So that's what I have.
Okay, give Rhonda a hand. She did a great job. We appreciate her efforts, and keeps me in line, and that's a good thing. As I was sitting over there, I thought perhaps I didn't introduce myself when I started talking. So I am Dallas Schroeder. I'm your county clerk. So I'm just not some random guy up here talking. I do have a role here. But it's a fun job, and Rhonda mentioned that there's a lot of different parts of it. And there are. I enjoy every part. No day is the same. I can tell you that. Every day is different. But as you look at this screen behind me, you'll see it's in the middle is the county clerk. And we didn't put it there just because I'm the county clerk. There's a reason for that. If you see all these different parts that we talked about, they don't touch each other outside the circle. They all go through the county clerk's office to touch something else. So all the different things that you're talk about, the print vendor doesn't go directly to any judges or through the score system. It all comes through us. And so it's very important who the county clerk is in Colorado. We have, as Rhonda said, great clerks throughout the state. But it's important that we have those great clerks, because the way the Colorado system works and the way it's set up is that so much of what happens with the election process comes through the county clerk's office. And it doesn't matter if it's Elbert County or a county out east or a metro county or a county out west. It's all set up the same way. And it's important that we have those clerks in place. They're going to follow the rule and follow the law and follow the best practices to make sure we have good outcomes. And so the county clerk is a vital part of how Colorado puts its elections together, and it gives the authority within the county to do that. And so it's very important to make sure that we have good clerks throughout the state. Now, I promised at the end of this I'd talk about some things that I think that we can improve as a state. I think we are head and shoulders above a lot of states out there, but there's always room for improvement, right? So let's talk about a couple of those things. And these are things that we can do, that we can make a difference with. There's some things that are just out of our control. There's no way. Until we actually get the ballot in at the post office or through a drop box, or you bring it to our office, that's out of our control, right? That's nothing I can't hand deliver a ballot to everybody in the county. So that's out of our control. So that's something what we need to look at is what can we make it within the county clerk's office control and within our best practices, our rules, and perhaps even in our statutes to strengthen what we are already doing. So one of my problems, pet peeves that I have with what we do right now is with the voter registration database. And it's with automatic voter registration. And we have expressed our opinion with that. We don't think that it's the best practice for us to do. And the reason that that is what we've seen the results within Elbert County and other rural areas when a person goes in to get their driver's license and they, I don't know, show of hands, how many people here actually get mail at their house as opposed to the post office? You get them at your house? How many use a post office box? Okay? I know we use a post office box for about 2 miles from the house to where our mailbox is, right? I'm not going to have all my goodies going there. So I have a post office box. And what happens when people go in to get a renewal on their driver's license or to get their first driver's license, or it affects mostly on the renewals. It is on the renewals. They don't have any idea that this is going to be automatically sent to us about their voter registration. And so they just put in their physical address, right? That makes sense. I have my physical address. That's what I want on my driver's license. And they don't put anything in there about a mailing address because it's on their driver's license, right? Well, when that is automatically sent to us to process, when that pops up and that doesn't show a mailing address, we're required to go into the voter's registration and we remove that post office box. And so since that started, we have people that have come to us and say, I don't understand why my ballot was returned, because we scan those in too, and we know why my ballot was returned. I've been using this address. I've lived here for 30 years. And as we got to them and we work with them and trying to figure this out, well, did you go or get a renewal on your driver's license? Well, yeah. Well, that was why, because we had to drop off that mailing address. So there's times we try and catch that as much as we can and contact the voter, but it's something that it's a real problem. It's something that affects rural counties more than urban counties, and we feel that it's a real problem and we need a solution on that. And so part of what Rhonda was talking about, find one of these things that it's a real issue for you, and be a bulldog on it. And talk to your legislators, talk to your different party leaderships or whatever the case may be, and be a bulldog on that single issue and try and make change with it. We do it through our side, through the Clerks Association, within contact within the Secretary of State's office, but that's to me is a real problem with the automatic voter registration. Another thing that I have problems with, and I think is something that needs to change, is driver's licenses that are issued for non-citizens. Are y'all aware that non-citizens can get driver's licenses now in the county, in the state? Okay, and that's I'm not going to comment on that, but what I have problems with particularly is the number configuration that's on that non-resident driver's license. And it says on there, not for voting purposes and so forth. But it's the same configuration that you have on your driver's license. So when a voter registration comes in, there's no way to just look at that driver's license number and tell whether the person is a citizen or not. It takes some extra steps to do that. And so I think that's something that when they first came out with that, we fussed about it and complained about it, but it didn't matter. But I think that it's a problem, and I think the citizens need to be aware that that is a problem and figure out, put some pressure on your legislators to make some changes with that, because I think it's a problem. I talked a little bit earlier about the RLA and how I had a hard time wrapping my brain about how the RLA worked, because it's a complex thing that takes place. And depending on the margin in the race and how many ballots were passed, what race they picked for us to check, it could be very few ballots that we check across the state. Our RLA this past year was something like 23 ballots is what we checked. Okay, 23, I think. 23? Does that sound right? It is. About 30. It wasn't very much, right? So my hard head has a hard time wrapping around that, right? And so other counties have a lot more depending on the race and all that. So in a statewide race, it's not just Elbert County that they're looking at, it's across the state and so forth. And so as we've been thinking and talking about how do we strengthen that, instead of having a top-down approach on the RLA where it's coming down from the Secretary of State's office on what ballots we pull, I think it's a good idea that we have local control. I'm all about local control, that we pick the ballots of what we want to test, and it goes from bottom up instead of top down. Okay, so there's no restriction on us doing that. So I spoke earlier that we did our hand count on the presidential. There's no restriction on the county clerk doing that once we have the ballots, right? So we were able to do that to verify what we were sending into the state was accurate. And likewise, we're not hand-tied by being able to do more extensive testing. And so we have been working with a gentleman in a group, included them part of our security team within the elections, to take a little bit deeper dive. And we did what I am going to be pushing for, and hopefully a lot of other clerks as we get along and are able to talk to them, to take more of this bottom-up approach to the audit. And so what we did with these people who are very interested in the security of the election, were able to look at some of our public lists. Nothing was given to them that wasn't available to you, but they ran some analysis on it. And so we kind of went this backwards way on a risk limiting audit. And so a few weeks back, they came to us and they said, on your batches, we found 4 batches of your 50 that go through the scanner that are showing an anomaly. Okay, no secret, Elbert County is a red county. We're heavy Republican county. That's not a secret. Everybody knows that. But you have 4 batches where Biden has between 23 and 27 votes in that batch of 50, and that's an outlier on those 4 batches because most of the batches, or all the rest of the batches within Elbert County, are only showing about 13 to 15 votes for Biden. And because of our system, and we're able to keep track of each batch through that we pulled those 4 batches and did it, and we also added another 300 ballots in there. We looked at the actual ballot. We looked at the cast vote record, which is a system, what's reported how the votes are tabulated. It's through the cast vote record and through our ballot manifest. And so we had all of that put together that we could look and see how all along the steps that those numbers are correct. Guess what? All those 4 batches plus the other 300, they're all right. Okay? But we're able to go do that. There's no restriction on a county clerk to go the extra mile, and we wanted to do that. We did extra mile on looking at signatures and making sure that they were actually wet signatures and not machine-made. We looked at ballots, made sure there was not any extra markings on there. So we went the extra mile on a lot of areas, and it's all coming back clean. But we want to be able to make that statement that we have done that extra work to make sure everything is good. So having that opportunity for us to do that reverse RLA from the bottom up, going up to the top, to me just makes sense. It's another check that we can do to make sure that what we're reporting is accurate. And we'll be talking about that at our conference. I want to be pushing for that. The last thing I'm going to specifically talk about is a signature verification and our system on that. And so the bigger counties have a different system on what they do. So I'm going to talk about what we have with signature verification. Our signature verification, we have a bipartisan team that looks at every single envelope that comes through. Every one of you, every single one gets eyeballs, 2 pairs. Look at it to compare it. And you might think that is a tedious process, and it is to a certain extent, but you got to get in a rhythm and you can see it. And the guidance isn't to look for reasons to reject a ballot. The guidance is we're looking for things that we can find in common that we can show that. So on my name, my D and my S are pretty consistent, right? But everything that's in the middle, sometimes it gets a little off. Maybe your signature is like that too. But there's some definite characteristics that you could look at my signature and say, yeah, we know that D and that S is consistent. And when they're popping those up and comparing with the signature we have on file through the score system, versus what is on that envelope, both those our teams can say, yep, 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 because you can just pull those up and you can just see that, yeah, those identifying characteristics are there. We have guidance on how to check on the signature verification, because we can go in and see what their rejection rates are and how they're doing. We can spot check them, but there's really, at this time, no way to do an audit on a judge, a team doing the signature verification on how they're doing, how we can actually go back and quantify and put it into record. And I know that our conference for the Clerks Association is coming up in June, and that's one of the topics that's on that we're talking about, is how do we go about developing a audit system, an audit on how the signature verification is taking place. And so I'm excited to be part of that conversation, because I think it's a move in the right direction, that we're going to be auditing how those are happening. It's not just a recommendation or a best practice anymore, but we're going to have criteria laid out. Hopefully we'll be able to get to that point, that criteria laid out, so that we do have that audit signature verification. So those are some things that, if maybe one of those really piqued your interest and you want to talk more about them later, we're more than happy to do that, and kind of point you in the right direction with that. But we do want to say we really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I hope you learned something. I hope it piqued your interest on some things. You want to talk about us to us for a while. We're going to be here. Rhonda and I both have our business cards here as well, so feel free to get those and call and talk to us later. But I really want to say thank you for coming out, giving us an opportunity to kind of show what we do, and let you know that we have the best of intentions to make sure that everything we do is above board, is open to the public, and want to answer any questions that you have. So thank you for coming this evening. We're going to cut the video and say good night. Oh yeah, we videoed this. We zeroed right on you, Dan.